Welcome to the Cut for Time podcast. I'm Eric Stearns, and this is Clay Lundberg, and we're coming from the Canton United Methodist Church in Canton, South Dakota.
Yeah.
So we're going to open tonight's podcast just kind of as our pilot, kind of explain what our goals are, who we are, and what we want to get what we want people to receive out of this podcast as we get going.
Indeed.
So I'm Eric Stearns. Grew up here in Canton, South Dakota. Been here all my life, essentially, except for a short time in college. Grew up in this congregation, and will be turning 30 here in the next couple weeks. So this has been my home for 30 years. So I've got 3 children, beautiful wife. Kids are 5, 3, and 9 months. And so I've got a very hectic life, but it's a lot of fun.
Nice.
And it's been a good time so far.
Nice.
So go ahead.
Eric, who are the pastors that really shaped you in your faith and got you to this point?
So it's been interesting. In this church, I've had 2 pastors, 3 pastors and then you. So you're our 4th pastor. So in those 30 years, I had one for a couple of years, and then 2 really long tenured pastors, for both of them 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And so we had, in at least in my experience for this church, that's a very long tenure. So both of them, obviously because they're the 2 that I had, really shaped me. But probably the one that really stood out to me was our pastor that we had at South Dakota State. Pastor Terry Johnson, actually where I met you at South Dakota State.
Yep.
But she had a way of sharing her message that was just easy for me to receive.
Yeah.
And I always enjoyed listening to her. She was always very friendly after church. We actually got to know her pretty well, and when she moved to Minneapolis after she was in Brookings, we actually went and visited her. And so that was a lot of fun. But she really stood out to me. And then Pastor Steve, who was the pastor here prior to you, I really got to know him well. And he has always been a kind of a focal point for us. We made sure, so our 3rd son, or our 3rd child, a little boy, he was born just prior to Steve retiring, and we wanted to make sure that he was the one to baptize him before he retired. And that meant a lot to us, just because he had been there for the other 2 baptism. And so
huge.
those are the pastors that really stand out to me.
Awesome.
As I've grown up in this congregation, or in this, I've never really gotten away from here. So,
Well, good. I appreciate your insights there. That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
My name is Pastor Clay Lundberg. I've been a pastor for 9 years now. I've served in a variety of different churches, even since I got out of seminary. I went to University of Sioux Falls for my undergraduate. I have a degree in theology and philosophy and a minor in music for reasons that pass understanding, but it was fun. Anyway, then I went to Sioux Falls Seminary and got my MDiv there. I was commissioned in the Methodist Church, which means that I was recognized as one with gifts and graces for ministry in 2013, and I was ordained as a full elder, that meaning that I had fruitfulness in ministry in 2016. During my 9 years, I've served for 3 years in Brookings as the student associate pastor for 1 year, and then as the full-time associate pastor for 2 years. That's where I met Eric. And then I served in Burke in South Dakota, South Central South Dakota, for 5 years. And then just this past July, my family moved here to Canton. I have a wife named Lindsay, who's a teacher in the Canton School District, and I have 2 little boys that are 4 and 1. And so that's kind of our life. And we also have a dog named Indiana. So that's us.
Very cool.
That's us.
So I've always wondered this. I've always wanted to ask a pastor this.
Yeah.
What drew you to this occupation? This is something that very few do, and you're going to feel a lot of opposition throughout your life, I'm sure. So what made you take this call?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was in 4th grade, I sang at my home church in Gregory, South Dakota, and our pastor's sister happened to be in worship with us that day. And Pastor Bob Simmons was our pastor at the time, and his sister, after church, I was getting my CD out of the CD player, and she just said, "Wow, that was amazing. Thanks so much for sharing your vocal gifts with us. Have you ever given any thought to ordained ministry?"
At 4th grade?
At 4th grade. I was like, no, I'm a 4th grader. I haven't thought about tomorrow, let alone what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. Give me a break, lady.
Sure.
didn't say that, obviously. I have a little bit more tact than that. I just kind of I just kind of chuckled and said,
How any fourth grader acts when you compliment them.
Yeah. I just want my CD back. That's all I want. So that was kind of always ruminating in the back of my head. Then in middle school, I went to church camp up at Lake Poncet. It was music, arts, dance, and drama, MAD camp, which was awesome. We did a chapel service at the end of the week, which was really fun, in the Lake Poncet chapel. And our dean of that camp was a woman named Lori Kidd, who's now known as Pastor Lori Kidd. She serves the church as a Wagner in Tyndall. And I was just having one of those days where it just wasn't a great day. And just, feeling all kinds of things about who I was as a person and the size of a person I was, because I've always been big. And Pastor Lori said, "Do you know why God gave you big shoulders?" And I said, "No, but I really wish he hadn't done that." And she said, No. God did that because God has a big plan for you. So those two things ruminated in the back of my head all throughout high school, and I was convinced from my freshman year of high school to my senior year of high school, like the last 2 months of my senior year of high school, this all kind of fell apart. But I was planning on being a band teacher. That was going to be my absolute destination. Everything that I did in high school pointed to that direction. Yes, I did sport. I mean, we were in a small town, so you're involved in everything. Mm-hmm. But on top of being in football, wrestling, and track, I was also in choir, selected choir, band, and jazz band. And I actually dropped out of a class to become a TA for my band teacher in high school.
Really?
Everything was moving in that direction. If I had a study hall, I was pink slipped into the band room because I wanted to go and practice something or do something or just hang out with my band teacher, Miss Jackson. And that was exactly what was going to happen. I was going to graduate, go to Northern State University, study music, education, and then be a band teacher. That was my absolute, just definitive goal.
Sure.
So, February of my senior year, 2006, hits. And we are going out. We're a part of this group called the Fellowship of Christian Students because no one wanted to do as much work as you have to do to have an FCA chapter,
Sure.
Fellowship of Christian Athletes chapter. So we had this thing called FCS. And so FCS decides that we're going to go out to Rapid City for an Acquire the Fire rally. And during that rally, we were the big, cool high school kids sitting in the back and just enjoying ourselves and worshiping God and learning about something and really just enjoying our time. But the whole time, my eye was drawn to the front because there's a group of middle school students from my school. They're from the Baptist church because that's one of the bigger youth groups in our town, and they are just losing their minds in worship. I mean, they're raising their hands, they're rocking out. Jeremy Camp led worship for us. It was
cool.
Unbelievable. And then I got to praying, I got to thinking, I was like, okay, I'm a senior in high school. We have this FCS thing. We meet every Sunday for Bible study. We meet every day for prayer in one of the classrooms. It was student-led, so it was,
wow.
We were fine. But I'm looking at these middle schoolers, I was like, they have this youth group, and that's awesome, but there's so much more that could be happening for them. So I was praying about it, and I just got this overwhelming sense of duh from God. Just, you silly, silly person, you know what to do with this. Do something. So we got back to our school the next day, the next Monday that there was school. This has been over one of those 3-day weekends where there's a break on a Friday or whatever. And so we got back to school the next Monday. And I went to my band teacher because, that's how I'd lived my life up to this point. And I said to her, if I was going to start a middle school devotional time, could I use the band room before school starts?
Sure.
When I had her permission, I ran to my principal and I said, hey, Mr. Dacey, I have this idea. We meet every day for prayer before school. And it's really been just so good for us and building us up. Could I do something like that for the middle school in the band room? And he's like, well, just get Mrs. Jackson's permission and you can do it. And I was like, hey, I'm a step ahead of you. I already have the permission to do it. And like
Sure.
a week later, I had flyers printed up and spread around the high school. And I was doing middle school devotions from February until school got out for anywhere between 30 and 35 middle schoolers.
Oh, wow.
And it just worked, you know? It was just one of those things that just really took off and took root. I had a guy that was a junior come with me for a while. He's like, dude, this is awesome. I want to learn what you're doing and do it next year.
That's cool.
Yeah. So,
Well, and it gave you the confidence to know that you could lead a group.
yeah, for sure.
And that's huge.
Yep.
Especially as a senior in high school.
So then another fortuitous thing that happened was my English teacher, Mrs. Glover, assigned us a capstone, senior capstone paper that was to explore a career that you've been thinking about going into.
Sure.
And I was just like, all right, I can sit down with two pastors in town and say, look, this is what I think God's doing. I don't know what to do with this. Help. And so I sat down with Scott McClellan from the Berean Church in town, and then my pastor, Royal Archer, that was serving the Gregory Church at the time. And Royal basically said, we've known this for a while. Thanks for getting on board. So, and he just affirmed things in me that I didn't see, but he saw. And like, he's just like, you are going to be a pastor. This is what's going to happen. And just from that moment, there was really no looking back.
Really?
I went to Northern State for a year. I had already had scholarships auditioned for a music scholarship, and I had financial aid lined up, and I'd registered for classes. But I got to Northern State. I immediately got involved with a campus ministry called Grace on Campus. Mm-hmm. And I immediately got involved with a church, Aberdeen First United Methodist Church up in Aberdeen. And from there, Royal that served Gregory, he had just come from Aberdeen. He had served Aberdeen North Highland. Mm-hmm. And so he was serving there up in Aberdeen. And so he knew Pastor Eldon Reich at First Church. Mm-hmm. And so even before I got to Aberdeen, Royal called Eldon called me, and I had been personally invited to worship by the senior pastor of Aberdeen First. And so I was just stuck. I was just hooked in there. I got involved with the choir. I got involved with the praise team. And then Eldon looked at me one day and said, look, you know the pulpit's yours anytime you want it.
Wow.
And that filled me with such a sense of fear and excitement that I just knew. I just knew. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yep. So I transferred to USF, got a degree in theology and philosophy, went to seminary, and then got my I got a student appointment my third year of seminary. So
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, but hey, if you hadn't gone to Northern, you wouldn't have met Lindsay. And
exactly.
See, you had to be there anyway.
Yep.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Becoming an engineer for me was kind of somewhat similar. I mean, throughout high school, I wanted to be a science, like a chemistry and physics teacher.
Okay.
Like that's what I wanted to do.
Nice.
And I think part of that was because school is all you know. From 5 to 18, that's what you do.
Yep.
You do school. And so that's what you know. And it was more me just realizing that, hey, I can do more with my love of science and take that somewhere else. Not downgrading becoming a teacher,
of course.
But I can do more with that. And I felt like, of course, I can make a heck of a lot more money becoming an engineer.
Fair.
But yeah, my physics teacher, who was by far and away the best teacher I ever had, even kind of mentioned to me, like, you become a science teacher, but you can do a lot more. And I went to a job fair at the Washington Pavilion, or not a job fair, a college fair, or career fair. And talked to South Dakota State about becoming about the engineering program, and I was like, yep, that's what I'm doing. So then I got my ag engineering degree because I grew up on a farm.
Nice.
And here we are. So
that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Little did I know I'd be doing a podcast. So what do you want to get out of this whole podcast experience?
Yeah. What I want to get out of this podcast experience is just a different avenue and a different, there's a difference between preaching a sermon and just sitting down and talking to someone. And I like preaching. I love the challenge of the fancy theological word for preaching is homiletics. I love the challenge of homiletics. I love the challenge of taking a scriptural text from thousands of years ago and finding ways to make it relevant and make it connect to our lives today. I love that. But I also love getting the chance to just talk,
Right.
to just have a conversation, and to really connect. I mean, because even as conversationally as I might try to preach, there's still a disconnect because I'm up here and the average church member is down there.
Right.
And so I think that this could bridge the gap between if I said something that was too steeped in theological language, or if I said something that, piqued a question that you want to explore. I think that we have the opportunity to do that.
Right. And that's when I came to this idea, that's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I think people put pastors on this pedestal that at some points is unfair. I mean, you're still a person. You still go through. I mean, you have kids the same age as I do.
Yep.
So we're still going through the same stuff.
Right.
They still don't want to go to bed. They still don't want to listen. I mean, and so I want this time to just be an experience of a conversation, to know that what we're doing in church, what God has provided us, we can just talk about.
Yeah.
And we're able to just talk about that. And so I'm really excited. I haven't been this excited about something in church in quite a long time. So this is going to be a good time.
Yeah, I dig it.
So,
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think that closes our first episode, and
Awesome.
I hope everyone joins us for the next one.
Great.